video. So today I will be doing my Book Junkie Trials wrap-up slash July wrap-up, mostly because the two were one and the same. All the books I read in July were for the Book Junkie Trials. And yeah, this video is coming out a touch later than I expected it to. I did move recently, and so you can see I'm filming from like a different place, and my filming setup is a little awkward right now, so I don't know how this is going to work. It's possible that like the frame will start to drip and I'll have to fix it or something like that. But for now, this is what I'm working with. It's also super hot, so I had to pull my hair back. But yeah, so Book Junkie Trials. I don't even know how many total books I read in July. I did the 17 challenges. So I read 17 books in July, and then I started like 3 others, and let's think. Yeah. But first I'm going to start with the last 2 weeks of the Book Junkie Trials because I did not do vlogs for those, or not really vlogs, they weren't vlogs, they were updates. I didn't do updates for those 2 weeks, mostly because those were the 2 weeks that I was focusing on moving the most. So yeah, also the 3rd week I took kind of a break. So the 3rd week of the Book Junkie Trials for me was focusing on wrapping up a couple of things that I was in the middle of, and then I think I had like one other goal, and I didn't meet it. So the 3rd week of the Book Junkie Trials, I finished listening to the audiobook of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. That was a lot of fun because I really love the audiobook. The story is fun and it's quirky, and then the narrator is also really good. I don't know. I've listened to some audiobooks where like the audio is kind of weird and digitally, and then the person speaking has like an unusually high voice or some kind of intonation that's like not pleasant to listen to, independent of how good the story is. But the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy had both a good story and a good narrator, and so that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that read. And I read that one for the book that has been on your TBR forever, because it's just the kind of book that I've heard about. I've never even seen the movie. There are references to it every now and again, and I figured it was time to read it. Then I also finished listening to the audiobook for Stardust. That took me longer than I expected it to. It's not a very long book. The audiobook is not very long either, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it, which really surprised me because I did enjoy the movie. I've seen the Stardust movie 2 or 3 times, and I'm down to see it again. But the book, it was only okay. I didn't like the audiobook. It was way too frilly. Like in between certain points in the novel, there would be weird music and like a random poem, and I did not like that. So it is what it is. Wasn't the most horrible thing in the world. Oh, I didn't give star reads. 5 out of 5 stars for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like 2 out of 5 stars for Stardust. Then I was also trying to finish reading The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin for the prompt about read the sequel for In the Forgotten Forests, I believe. But I didn't finish that book. I ended up reading another book for that. And that like wraps up week 3. That's all I set out to do for week 3. I was doing a lot of other stuff. I did some filming for my recent August bullet journal videos, and that was about it. Then for week 4 of the Book Junkie Trials, things got serious because I was also doing Reading Rush, and I didn't complete everything I wanted to do for the Reading Rush. I like scratched in this outline with the Reading Rush prompts and then the Book Junkie Trials prompts, and I tried to match as many as I could, and some of them like I didn't think I would match, but then ended up using anyway because there was like a little tiny bit that kind of matched a Book Junkie Trials prompt. And so I did a ton of reading on the very last week, and I wonder how well I documented this. Yeah, I read like, I needed to read 6 books, I think, for the Book Junkie Trials, and I read 5 that week. So the first book I read that week were actually two. I started the week off with two graphic novels. The first one was The Sandman Volume 2, A Doll's House, or The Doll's House. Do I have it here? Yeah. The Doll's House. And this is the book I ended up counting for Read a Sequel, just because it is a sequel. I read it for the prompt, the Read English prompt, read a book in one place. And I did. I read it in one place. It was fine. I don't like it very much. So I'm reading Sandman. My boyfriend owns the first 3 volumes, so I read the first 2, and it's okay. I think I would give this like a 3 out of 5 stars. It's super gritty. It's not my usual style. I don't like the artwork. Like, it's technically horror. That being said, my boyfriend has also told me that the Sandman doesn't stay horror. Like, it starts really hardcore in the horror genre, and then it kind of does something else. It goes a slightly different direction. And I don't know. I'm going to read the third one. I mean, it's relatively easy to read. Like, I won't buy them. So my boyfriend owns the first 3. I'm going to read those. And then the next, like, 9, I think, I will probably end up trying to get from a library. If I can't, I'll wait until I can. I don't think I'll end up buying them. Okay, so then the other graphic novel I read was Wires and Nerve by Marissa Meyer. And that is a book that follows the android friend of Cinder from the Lunar Chronicles. And I counted that book for Read a Book About Royalty, the Queendom Stone, I believe, because it features royalty, because this android's best friend is Cinder, and Cinder is a queen. So that's what I read. It was okay. Also, like, the first of a graphic novel, like 288 pages. The story just got started, but it's fine. It picks up some of the events, or it attempts to tie up loose ends from the end of the Lunar Chronicles. And it's okay. There's an interesting, like, romance, I think, developing, and I didn't like that it was all monochrome. So the graphic novels, I haven't read many graphic novels lately, but, like, Sandman is in full color, and I really enjoyed that. Wires and Nerve was in, like, this bluish gray, black and white kind of color scheme. And I also didn't like the artwork. The way the characters are drawn and represented just, they don't match the ones in my head at all, which is, like, isn't their fault. It's just my own head. And nevertheless, they weren't the most enjoyable representations to me. But the story was okay, and I think there's only one out right now, so someday I'll keep reading that probably. So I would give that 4 out of 5 stars, because there were some things I didn't like, but it was also, like, it was entertaining, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. What else did I read that week? Okay, then the next thing I read was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I read that for an author's first book in the reading rush, and then also for something in the book Junkie trials. What did I end up counting that as? Where are my notes? Okay. Oh, it was a book that intimidates you. The giant squid location. And that was because I thought I had already started Shadow and Bone once, and then didn't like it and never finished it. But I've heard so many good things about it that I thought I would try picking it up again, but I was really uncertain about it. I was also having to read it during the reading rush, and so I was trying to read it within, like, a day, and I think I read it in a day and a half, and it was good. It was surprisingly good. I'm interested in continuing the story. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. It got really readable. I around the middle. I feel like the first half I was kind of tired and like not the most interested in it, and then the second half things got a little more exciting. So Shadow and Bone is the first book in the Grisha trilogy, which is Grisha. The Grisha are like a type of people in this world that can do what is essentially magic, I guess. And this book follows someone who turns out they have like a really rare kind of power, and in this world there's something called the Shadowfold. I think that's what it's called. And it's this region that kind of cuts across a continent that is really dark, and monsters live in there, and you can't cross it without like it's really risky to cross it, and lots of people always die if they try to cross it. And there's like conflict because there are wars also on other side of the Grisha fold, and there are several, not Grisha fold, Shadowfold, and there are lots of nations that are trying to figure out how to deal with this issue, but then they're also fighting with each other about how to deal with this issue. And there's like, yeah, and so it cuts economies, and it makes it hard to trade, and there's a lot of conflict. And so people are trying to figure out how to deal with the Shadowfold, how to maybe get rid of it, because it was created by a Grisha several, like, supposedly hundreds of years before the events of the book. This Shadowfold developed, and that just started a lot of problems by like an unusually power-hungry Grisha. And I don't think I'm doing the best at explaining this. It's been a while since I filmed the video, maybe like 2 weeks, I think. So yeah, I'm also in a really awkward position. Just like I'm sitting on the floor, and I'm worried my camera is going to fall. So there's that. Yeah, so I read that. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars also. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be reading the second book, which I believe is called Siege and Storm. And then the next thing I read was The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. That was a 5-star read. I really loved that book, and I didn't expect to. Like, I don't even know what genre it is. It might be middle grade, it might be young adult. I don't know. I have no idea. But it was so good. It was so cute. And the way it's told is kind of in a ethereal, like fairy tale kind of narration, and it was about a really cute story. So the premise is that there are these there's this town, and it lives next to a forest that no one ever goes into because it has a lot of dangerous like steam vents and poisonous bogs and animals that will attack you, and an evil witch. And so no one ever goes into the forest. There's one road that kind of passes through it, but it's heavily guarded and like heavily regulated who gets to cross this road. You don't really go into the forest. And the way the people have chosen to like satiate this witch so that she doesn't attack them is to have a sacrifice. Every year they sacrifice the youngest and newest born baby in the village to the witch. And so they find it, they put it in the forest, the witch takes it, and no one knows what she does with it, but they just assume something bad. And that's how they live their lives. In reality, there's a witch, and she doesn't understand where these babies are coming from or why they're coming from, like where they're appearing or why. But she picks them up and she carries them across the forest and gives them to families on a town just on the other side of the village, the forest. And as she does that, it's a long journey. She usually runs out of milk. Like she carries, I think it's goat's milk with her, but she can only carry so much. And the journey is longer than the amount of milk she's able to carry. Like if the milk she's able to carry can feed the baby for 2 days, the journey's 3 days long or something like that. And so at the very end, she feeds them Starlight at the end. Starlight has properties that are nourishing, and it's essentially magic, this Starlight, and it gives the babies nourishment and also makes them a little stronger, a little more likely to succeed and flourish once they get wherever they're going and as they grow up. And that's because in this world, all celestial light has magic properties, but starlight is celestial and magic light coming from so far away that by the time it gets to the Earth and by the time she's able to collect it, it's very diluted. It's a very diluted form of magic. However, one day she's going with a baby and she's distracted or something happens and she feeds this baby moonlight. And the moon is so much closer that the magic from it is far more concentrated. And so the girl develops powers that she doesn't think any regular person in this other town she usually brings the babies to will be able to handle raising her, because a baby with magic doesn't know how to control it. And so she takes it upon herself to adopt the child. And that's like the premise of the story. It happens within the first couple of chapters. I think the blurb will tell you all of that. Lots of other stuff happens. I don't think I've said too much. We just followed the story of this girl who drank the moon and how her powers develop and what that means for the witch who's raising her, and things like that. Super good. I actually really liked it. A little long. Like, I feel like it was so long that I tried to read it faster, I think, than I otherwise would have felt like I needed to, because I feel like it's a book that could really be read slowly and that would benefit from kind of a slower consumption than I think I read it at. And I read that for a book. I need to just keep these pages open. With rich world building, and I think it was a book with rich world building. The world was just very present, and even though it wasn't like a hard magic system. It wasn't a world where there were hard and fast rules for how the magic worked, how it developed. None of that. It was just kind of magic, but it was still really visual. Like, I could imagine the towns, and I could imagine how all the different things were working and the relationships between the townspeople and the witch and the other townspeople, and so I would consider it to have rich world building. What else did I read? That's 4 books. Oh, and then I read, the 5th book I read that week was One Day in December by Josie Silver. And I have that for the Reading Rush. It was a book you meant to read last year. And then for the Book Junkie Trials, I had it as Apothecary Towers. Choose a book at random from your bookshelf. And that was hard for me because I didn't have a very large bookshelf. I didn't have my books all collected. And most of them I've read already, and I didn't want to reread books. But I ended up choosing this book for it because there were a lot of weird intersections that were pretty random. Like, I didn't choose those intersections. It was just unusually convenient that One Day in December was a book I chose to read last year, or I had meant to read last year. It was also a book I physically owned on my bookshelf, and it was the book club choice for a Facebook group I'm in. So I didn't pick it, the book club picked it, and I also happened to already own it. So that's why I counted it for that. What do you call it? Prompt. And it was okay. 3 out of 5 stars. Not amazing. I don't like books that take place in the real world. So I read a lot of fantasy, sci-fi, that kind of thing. This book in particular I thought was unusually mundane. There's a weird kind of fate, love at first sight kind of thing that happens in it that you might consider not mundane, but it was so far-fetched that I didn't believe it. I didn't like it. Yeah, I just wasn't that interested in it. I was reading it and I didn't like it almost the whole time, and it just wasn't the book for me. It involves this encounter one day in December with 2 people, a woman on a bus and a man standing just outside, like near a bus stop, and their eyes meet and they like fall in love instantly, and the girl spends like a year or so trying to find him again, because she thinks they're just meant to be together. And then she eventually finds him and things aren't ideal. And I don't want to spoil that because I don't know if it's in the... Oh, I have it here. This is the cover. It was a book of the month book for December. Okay, so it says it in the blurb. Basically, when she finds him, it's because he's being introduced to her as her best friend's boyfriend. And so now this person she's been pining after for a year is suddenly involved with her best friend, and she's trying to kind of deal with those feelings. I don't know, I didn't like the characters. They weren't interesting to me, almost any of them. They were kind of caricatures in some ways of people. I don't know. I couldn't connect with this book. I didn't like it. Did I say 3 out of 5 stars? Yeah, it was readable. Like the writing style wasn't annoying or anything, but the story itself was not the most interesting to me. So 3 out of 5 stars. Then the last book that I read for the Book Junkie Trials, I read in the last few days in the first half of the following week, and it was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I listened to the audiobook of that and was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. 5 out of 5 stars. It was good. It's about 2 boys who live in a world where there's something called Deathcast. And Deathcast is this company that will call you the day you die, and they tell you that this is your last day on Earth. They help you kind of settle any last affairs you might have, write a will, things like that, choose your tombstone, all of that. But they don't tell you when you're going to die, and they don't tell you how you're going to die. Just sometime in the next 24 hours, you're gonna die. And there's another thing in this world called the Last Friend app. And it's where people who are on their last day can connect with each other if they don't want to be alone on their last day. Because sometimes, stuff happens. Lonely people or people who have family that are far away or can't be there with them or don't have close friends. For whatever reason that you might not be able to be with people you know, or you don't want to be with people you know, you can connect with a stranger that spends their day with you. And sometimes that stranger is also on their last day, and sometimes they're just a random person that wants to make sure that people who are on their last day have company. And they're called Last Friends. And so these 2 boys, Mateo and Rufus, meet via the Last Friend app, and they are each other's last friends. And the book is just the things they choose to do on their last days and how they develop a really sweet friendship over the course of this last day together. And it's so sad. I read it for Weeping Falls. And the title of the book tells you what happens. They both die at the end. Deathcast has never been wrong. And that's so tragic, but it's also such a good story because they're very different people. Mateo is very reserved. He's very shy. He keeps to himself. He doesn't do anything risky ever. And it's his last day, and he's terrified because he spent his whole life playing it safe. And now it doesn't even matter because he's dying young anyway. These boys are like 17 and 18 years old, and he struggles to cope with that. Rufus is far more outgoing. He has some very close friends in an orphanage, and when we first meet him, he's actually involved in a fight. And so they're super different people, and yet somehow... They're super different people, and yet they meet and bring out the best qualities in each other. So like Rufus encourages Mateo to try new things, and Mateo has Rufus reflect on how he's lived his life up to that point and how he might have like been able to live it better and spend his last day being his best possible self. And it's so sweet. And there's like a red herring in it too, because the whole time you don't know how they're going to die, and they get into all kinds of situations, and you're just kind of thinking like, is this where it happens? Because this is the middle of the book, but it definitely seems like they're in a really risky situation. And then like there's this build up where there's a tension, and you're like, wow, okay, maybe this is how they're going to die. But then that situation fizzles out and they don't, and I'm like, whoa, what's happening? And they come near death so many times, and then at the very end you find out what happens to them. And oh, it's so good. It's so sad, but it's also, in this world, it's kind of the perfect day, in that they knew they were going to die, and by the time they do, they're content. They're content with how they spent their last day. I don't know. It was amazing. I also don't know if I have said too much. I will put a spoiler alert at sometime in this, because I've rambled a bit. But it's so good. I really liked it. And since I'm talking about spoilers, I'm just going to keep talking about this book and tell you my full ideas on it, because I'll have already told you that I might spoil it. Basically, it was so good, because even as you know they're going to die, the book tells you they're going to die, and Deathcast has never been wrong, you still kind of hope that maybe they're going to be the two that Deathcast was wrong about, and they'll get to live their lives, and then they don't, because Deathcast was wrong. Or because Deathcast is never wrong. So that was good. That was the last book I read for the Book Junkie Trials, and I read 17 books. So, quick recap of the books I did read. Although that's not entirely true. I finished one book and started one book before July, because the Magi were able to start their challenges 3 days early. So the first book I read for the Book Junkie Trials was Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and I finished that before July started. Song of Achilles I started in June but finished the first day of July. Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Good book, really loved that as well. Then there was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. That was okay. In another video I talked about the things I didn't like about that book. Then after that, His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. Also okay, but not my favorite. I ranted about that in another video. Then Stardust by Neil Gaiman. Again, fine. Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Very good book. I love that book. I've read it like 3 times now. The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. Another 5-star read. Super, super good. I loved the world in that book, and I love the way it is told. Yeah, I feel like to explain why I love the way it's told would get spoilery, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it's really good. I love the 3 perspectives that we follow in that book. Then I started Heartless by Marissa Meyer, but I did not finish it. I mentioned in another video that I'm not the biggest fan of Alice in Wonderland, so I don't know why I picked this book, and I'm not 100% sure whether I will try to finish it. Maybe. Then The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I read the audiobook. I started The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy, which is the sequel to the 5th season. I'm almost halfway through, I think, but I did not finish it in July. I will definitely pick it up again, probably sometime this month. Then I read... Oh, I forgot 2 books at the beginning. I also read Sandman Volume 1, I forget what it's called. The subtitle, like Volume 2 is called The Doll's House. I don't know what Volume 1 is called. Then Blankets by Craig Thompson, I think. I didn't like that book either. It's a graphic novel, also like realistic fiction. Not my favorite genre. I didn't enjoy that book, which didn't surprise me. It fit a prompt. It was a graphic novel. I knew it would be a quick read, but it wasn't the most enjoyable read. Then I read Wires and Nerve by Marissa Meyer, and then the last few books that I've already mentioned. So, let's see. I want to make sure that I have all of these pages. Okay, so let's recap, really, one more time. Oh, a book I didn't mention. For Empty Barrel Inn, an indulgent read, I did read Korra, The Legend of Korra Turf Wars, Volume 1. Ooh, I have it here. I forgot to mention that book. That book was fine. It's really short, super short, so not like a ton happens, but it continues where the show left off, and it was fine. It was good. And so I talked about every book I read in the month of July and the Book Junkie Trials. Did I start any other books? I thought I had not finished 3 books. But I see 2. I might be forgetting one, but if there's one other book I didn't finish it, so it's not that important. In another video, I talked about my August setup in here and the books that I will be reading. That's changed a lot. I may or may not update that. Maybe in the August wrap up, I'll talk about that. But yeah. Okay, so I've kind of gone through really quickly all the books that I read. And now I want to end this video with a little discussion on how I felt about the Book Junkie Trials overall. I really loved them. That being said, they were exhausting, and that's in part my own fault. I decided to do all 17 challenges, and I did, and I was really proud about that, but I'm so exhausted. So like, I had planned to do Disney-a-thon in August, but I'm not doing Disney-a-thon. I'm going to take the next 3 weeks super relaxed and do the Creating and Co. book club, what's it called, readathon at the end of August. It's Discover New Worlds themed. I'll probably link some information down below. But that's a week-long readathon that I will plan for later in the month, but not do any readathon reading the first part of the month. My the Forgotten Book Club on Facebook, there's a group I'm in that's reading Nevernight as their group read this month, so I will be doing that. But yeah, I'm not doing a lot of the readathon stuff that I had planned because the Book Junkie Trials was exhausting, and now that I've moved, there's so much other stuff that I want to focus on. I want to focus on unpacking, and I want to focus on doing some self-study work that I wanted to wrap up before classes start in September. So I just kind of want to wrap all of that up, and to do another readathon would take far too much of my effort. But that being said, the Book Junkie Trials was a ton of fun. I really loved the prompts. I loved the world built in the readathon, the map, the teams, the team leaders. I did not do any of the, what were they called, mini quests or mini challenges that were largely hosted on Twitter. I saw them, but I didn't want to do them, mostly because I spent all my time reading. I was reading so much, and I saw like a mini quest, and I was like, I don't even have time to think about this. I'm so tired. So that's one thing. However, I wanted to read all 17 prompts because you get a power-up. and I really wanted to know what the power-up was. And if I understood the announcement correctly, I think the power-up for reading all 17 prompts is that next year you get access to all of the powers that other teams have or other people. And I think for completing your quests, your team's quest, you get to level up and get an extra power. So having read all 17 books, you get access to like a ton of powers. I don't know how it's all gonna work, but I was really excited and I really wanted to find out about it. And so now I qualified for that, and I'm excited to see what happens next year. There's also going to be a winter readathon, I think, and so I'll definitely prioritize that. I will participate in that. And yeah, I think it was really well put together. There was a lot happening though. It was hard to, for me, it was hard to figure out exactly where the best place was to find all the information. There was like the YouTube video, but then there was Twitter and there was Instagram. And some people I know have said that like more information should have been on more places. I would have liked one place, but that's just me. It would be easier for me to know exactly where to look. I also know that Twitter is really big for like the bookish community. There's a lot of people doing book stuff on Twitter, and I don't use Twitter. So I in part was just confused because I don't use Twitter, and so I had a hard time keeping up with Twitter stuff. But with a little practice, I'm sure like that's not a big deal at all. I'm sure it was well organized on Twitter. I just don't know how to use Twitter. I did end up having a group chat with some people who were also in the Magi team, and that was a lot of fun to see where other people were and how they were getting on with their prompts and their challenges. I feel like towards the end of the month that group chat died a little bit because people started to give up, and that was kind of sad because there were people who, not just in the group chat, just in general, who didn't finish the quest or just gave up on the readathon because it started to stress them out. And I don't know, that was really sad to me because I feel like the readathon was meant to be fun, and it has no stakes whatsoever, you know, like even whether you play by the rules is your own personal choice. What you choose to give to the readathon is your own choice. So there's, on the one hand, I can see how people would be stressed, but on the other hand, I feel like you didn't need to. That being said, I also found myself being stressed out about the readathon because I set up these goals and then it was really hard to get to them at the very end. But I also feel like the readathon is so flexible that you could definitely tailor it to make it less stressful. Like, I planned to read lots of novels, and then once it became clear that the novels were going to be too lengthy for me to complete, I put in more graphic novels for the latter part, for the extra team quests, because your team's TBR couldn't be adjusted, right? But your extra quests could. And so I moved those around all the time. I moved them around. If I found something that I wanted to read and wasn't on my TBR, I stuck it in a prompt that it happened to fit because there were so many prompts. And I found graphic novels, and I feel like if you know you're going to have a hard time going through something like a set TBR, pick slightly shorter books or pick graphic novels, or like plan around that so that it doesn't have to be as stressful. That was kind of how I dealt with the fact that there was a lot going on. There were a ton of prompts, and after reading a set TBR, like for the initial mage path, I was tired. And so for all the rest of the prompts, you know, I let them be looser. And even though I set out to read certain books for the prompts, I did not feel like I had to stick to them. It wasn't in the rules to stick to them, and I did not do it. Felt no shame in replacing a 400-page book with a 200-page graphic novel. It would just make it possible, and I still feel like there's no less accomplishment in having done all of those things, because at the end of the day, I still read a ton this month, and so I feel like going at the readathon with this idea of flexibility and like go with the flowness, even if it's technically more structured than some others where you did have the set TBR, I think could really help. And so I really enjoyed it. That's kind of the way that I got through the readathon, and I will definitely do my best to participate next year. So I'll definitely try to participate next year. I know that I will be like in the middle of a summer intensive next summer, so I don't think I'll be able to get to all 17 prompts again, but I will, or however many prompts there are, but I will definitely pick a team. Well, I'm gonna stay on my team, but I'll do the team path and we'll see how that all goes. I really enjoyed this readathon, and I think that it has the potential to be a lot of fun if you go at it from a certain mindset, and it also had the potential to be super stressful if you went from a slightly different direction. But I also don't think that was any fault of the people who organized it. I think it was very well organized, and there were certain parts of it I didn't fully explore, like the mini trials. I think next year I will probably try to compete more with the mini challenges on Twitter. I have a year to figure out how to work Twitter, and also the competitive trials. So there was this whole other segment of competition that I didn't even touch. I did not attempt to participate in the competitive trials because I didn't have as much experience with BookTube or even the more recent books in general. I haven't been up to date. I'm really just starting to get back into reading this summer, and so I wasn't up to date with some of the more recent, more popular reads, and I didn't think I'd be able to do this extra like trivia contest scavenger hunt thing that they had. But I also thought it was a really good idea, and there were some issues with if you didn't weren't as like into BookTube or something, you might not have been able to participate as well, and people thought that that might not have been like the best idea, but I don't have any problem with it. I mean, you don't have to participate in every section, and you participate in what you're most comfortable or most qualified to participate in, and then you don't participate in other things, and then next year, you know, maybe you brush up on your BookTube, and then you're able to participate in the competitive trials. And they're competitive, right? So there are certain things that you'll be better at than other parts. So I don't know. I really liked it. I don't think I would really change much about it at all. I don't know how it will go into a second year. Like, I'm really interested to see like how prompts change, how the map will look, if the map will change at all, or if it will be the same kind of map. How the readathon will be balanced when you have people who participated one year, people who are going to come in for their first year, and how that like tier system is going to work. And I think those kinds of things can be really easy to like hurt the system, like do things where suddenly the readathon doesn't feel as balanced or it feels stale. But I also believe in like the organizers to put together something fun, because this year was so much fun. So that was my first readathon as well, the Book Junkie trials. So like the first readathon I ever participated in was also this huge thing. But I'm really glad that I did it. I'm really excited to participate in more readathons. Not a big one this summer, just that week long, or this August, just that week long one I mentioned. And then in September, I will be doing a month-long readathon, the TBR readathon, that's on Twitter, and I think it's still pretty small right now, but I will be linking that information down below because it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's a bingo style readathon, so that's also fun. There's like a bingo card with prompts, and you try to fill in certain prompts. So that's what I will be doing for the next like 2 months, really, is that week-long readathon, the September readathon, and then we'll see what October, November, and December bring. But that has been my July. That has been my experience with the Book Junkie trials, and I'd love to know, you know, what you did in July? What did you read? Did you participate in the Book Junkie trials, and how did that go? So comment down below. I would love to know what you thought, and I will see you next time. Bye!